God Save the King. For more on the coronation, a broadcast journalist Kofi Tete and Otumba Olabode Oseni, a public affairs analyst from London, joins us via Zoom to relish this historic moment. It's good to have you join us at this time. God save the king, no more God save the queen. So we've seen, thank you gentlemen for joining us on The World Now. So we've seen, it's been a day of crowns, scepter and robes, a fusion of tradition and modern touch. I want to ask, what's stood out for you in this coronation ceremony? Let me start with you, Mr. Kofi.
Well, it just underscored a couple of old values we always knew. Britain is still the class international act of pomp and pageantry. They had 10,000 servicemen on duty on the day, and not one person put a foot wrong. And so the visuals, the royal carriage that was built in 1762 and has been used at every coronation since 1831. The visuals are incredibly powerful. And to be honest with you, considering what the British people are going through now, this coronation felt a little bit like an oasis in a desert of bad economic and political news. So yes, if I was scoring them out of 10, I'd give them an 11 because they batted out of their socks. They did extremely well.
A pretty interesting point. Apart from the fact that we saw the pomp and pageantry and tradition at its best with a fusion of modernization, Otumba, I was going to ask you, what's the significance of today if we already had the proclamation of the king last September?
Well, let me start by saying I want to congratulate the new king and also want to wish all the subjects all the best. Here we have a long-standing tradition, which, in fairness to the monarch, that they've been there for years. And it's also shown clearly that they are still very popular. Now, having said that, there is, granted that this is a success or successful coronation, we must also not forget there's we're not so large. There's also a great number of people who are anti-monarch. They are not, totally in support of the monarch rule. They are more or less still hoping and wanting to have a republic. But then again, like I said, when you look at the number of countries that are still under the rule of the queen before she died, and then the son has now taken over, it cannot be downplayed to be a small event. It's a major, huge event, and we need to see how many more years of strain and what changes are going to be brought to the Commonwealth. Commonwealth being one of the major partners in the kingdom.
A lot of persons, of course, are interested in these times because King Charles has shown himself as the climate change king, an environmentalist. We're also having a king, a deviation from what we've had in the last 70 years. Kofi, I was going to ask you, we've seen royal fans, brace the reins of the British weather to welcome the king and also witness this historic moment. But some Brits are questioning spending money on such an event, having millions watch this event, although the king tried to play down the numbers, that's the number of guests that will be attending compared to what we saw in 1953 when the queen was coronated. But what would you say is the problem? How do we merge the monarchical system and the pageantry that we see with the way people are feeling as to why should we do this coronation when there's a rising cost of living?
Look, Britain is a singular act. So many bits of Britain don't fit 2023. For example, those oaths are to the king and his heirs. In other countries, the oaths are sworn to the constitution, the flag, or the nation. So there's something peculiarly medieval almost about the ceremony that we have just witnessed. The British Constitution is unwritten. I don't know any other countries in which you could govern without a written constitution. It's driven by a series of conventions, and they know how to make it work. I have to add that actually the question of support for the monarchy is, it's a bit divisive because people who are under I would say 35 years old, there's only 32% of them in a recent poll who support the idea of monarchy. People of my generation, of course, grew up with the monarchy. We're used to it. And who likes change? Nobody likes change. So, so this is something which has to be managed with a deft hand. Now, the last monarch of the United Kingdom was probably the world's greatest stateswoman. She knew everybody personally. She'd been in touch with everybody personally. And she had a job experience of 70 plus years. This is a very, very tough act to follow. So I suspect, for example, going forward, that the prince may have to tone down some of his statements about the environment because they are now becoming highly politicized. It was Lord Hailsham who once said that we live in a monarchical republic, which is, which is like mixing oil and water. But again, as I said, it is through deft management that these issues are handled. And I suspect that you cannot study at the knee of the world's class act of deft management, being Elizabeth II, the longest reigning ever monarch of the United Kingdom, without having learned a trick or two about how to balance and gauge events. So that is where we are.
Well, the king is also facing calls to apologize for his ancestors' involvement, which would be a tall order in colonization and the slave trade. Otuba, I want to hear your thoughts on this. What should the king be doing to unify the UK and the Commonwealth nations, since there are questions about what apologies should be given, what it should be doing? What's your take on that?
Again, I just quickly want to chip into what the guest said there. We should not also forget that King the Third now has been an apprentice since the last 70 years. Well, let me put it that way. He may not have been in like doing what his mother did best, but then I cannot imagine that within a short period of time that he will not show that he's up to the job. And by the time he goes around most of the countries, getting to know the leaders of all these Commonwealth countries, he will find out that he will need to work with them. Now, coming to your question, I think what I would say to that is what we get out of this new order would largely be to what we, third world, the Commonwealth country, put into it. Because at the end of the day, even if we want to say that a couple of 100 years ago, that our development was stampeded or was terminated by the intervention of the colonial here and there. The question again is 70, 80 years on, what have we made out of the experience? It seems to me that we the African countries, are still not doing enough to finish the business of learning. We're still like into big economic issues, corruption, and many other things that we are still not showing the perfect sign of we can govern ourselves. These are issues that has to do with us, not with them. So I would think if we start having new leaders coming up, because the old leaders have gone, we cannot start worrying ourselves about that. The new leaders, and I want to start hoping that starting from Nigeria, that the new arrangement, new president-elect will bring into governance in Nigeria will help other African countries to start standing on our feet to tell our Commonwealth partners, especially the new king, that this is what is good for us, and this is what we want. Again, it all boils down to what we want to make out of the new agreement.
Can I just add to that? I think this
ahead.
is an important point.
Go ahead.
You see, as far as Nigerians are concerned, they're just Nigerians. But the truth is, 1 in 5 Black Africans south of the Sahara is a Nigerian. That's 20%. And so the trajectory of a country like Nigeria casts a huge shadow over the entirety of Africa, and I would indeed say the Commonwealth. Now, the point that's arising is that there seems to be a step change in mentality, attitude, and behavior amongst the people I call the Zoomers, Generation Z. They are the kids, if I may so call them. Rather, I should say the younger people who are coming up to 26 and 27 at the top end. The demands these people are making, for me, actually constitute what a lawyer would call force majeure. They are literally the voice of God. And the voice of the people does become the voice of God. These people don't want to compromise. They know their left from their right. Their mentality and mindsets are completely different. What I'm trying to say is that around issues like the former colonial powers coming to terms with 200, 300, and 400 years of history it's a force they cannot resist. It will become the voice of God. It will become an act of nature. And so it wouldn't surprise me if at some stage there is a volte-face, a turnaround around issues like reparations, around issues like apologies, and so on.
All right.
I cannot agree. I cannot agree more. I agree with you. You did, yeah.
So while taking this oath, that's the king now, he had promised to uphold the law during his reign, and says it will foster an environment in which people of all faiths may live freely. And we saw that play out at the coronation ceremony with the diverse culture and the diverse heads of states and governments that we saw present at this event. Kofi, let me start with you before I get to Otuba. What does this speak to the reign of King Charles? What should we expect compared to what we saw under Queen Elizabeth II?
By the way, Kofi is my father's surname and my surname. My real name is Tete, or shortened to
pardon
Tet.
me.
So let's do that now. No, the issue is that I believe that things like climate change and so on are things which will have to be taken off Prince Charles's personal table. They will have to be managed through the political system. And we've also got to understand that while the pomp, pageantry, and ceremony is really enormous, it has an overarching unifying effect on the United Kingdom. But the monarchy is a symbol of powerful underlying institutions representing the economy, finance, politics, trade, and the military. Now, in all of those arenas, Britain is somewhat shrinking. However, if you ask me, do I want the British Army as my ally or my enemy? I would say I want them as an ally. They are still a force to be reckoned with. The City of London still has enormous sway on international finance. And of course, because of 300 years of colonial history, Britain's trading partnerships around the world are second to none. So these are the things that are really going to drive and shape the future of our lives. And that's what we got to address.
Yeah, very quickly, Otuma, let me just get your final thoughts in like 30 seconds.
Yeah, well, on the same matter, I agree with Mr. Kofi, and we should also not forget that it's an Herculean task for the new king. He'll be leading and heading almost about 40 countries. And even though there's growing but for people who want to detach, who want to transform, who want to change their present status to Republican. All these are going to be issues that he will have to deal with. And as you know, the system here, it does not make him to be a kind of a public figure like a president of a state. All these will be what is the subsequent prime minister will have to do for him.
Yeah.
And then again, they will doing that in his name. And I'm sure his input will be, please remember, I have so many children, I have so many countries I need to look after. Whatever policy that is involved, or whatever policy the subsequent government is going to bring, they would have to take cognition. They have to recognize that there are many other countries that they will need to work with. And like I said again, I want to repeat, I wish and look forward to African countries to do what they have to do. Then we also have to do more to make us not look like we are not changing, we are not capable of doing anything.
I'm afraid we're pressed for time. Public Affairs Analyst Otumba Olabode Oseni, thank you so much for joining us. And broadcast journalist Tete Kofi, thank you so much for joining us on The World Now. We'll take a moment now and then return with more stories. To stay with us, you're watching The World Now.